Tedakoto te whānau o Auckland Unitarian. Tedakoto nā manahur domai hairmai ki tere whānau karakia a te atua. Tedakoto te tato katoa. We welcome you into this circle of community where we try to huddle to stay warm. Welcome into the space made sacred by Auckland Unitarians for 116 years. We welcome you from demands and delights of the daily round, from the dirty dishes and unwaxed floors, from unmowed grass and untrimmed bushes, from all the incompleteness and not yet startedness, from the unholy and the unresolved. We invite you to attend to our vision of peace and justice, of joy and laughter, of delight and devotion, of the lovely and the holy, of who we are and what we can do. We welcome the power of tradition and the exhilaration of newness, the wisdom of the ages and the knowing of the very young. We welcome beauty, eloquence, poetry, and music to be the bearer of our dreams. We welcome you to open your eyes, your ears, your mind, your hearts to the amplest dimensions of life. We especially welcome you if you are a visitor or just passing through or seeking a spiritual home. Know that we're pleased and honored by your presence. You should also know our worship service is only the prelude to morning tea. It is our sacrament of hospitality, and it won't be complete without you. This Sunday is devoted to not taking ourselves so seriously. As community, we are proud to consider ourselves free thinkers, so we might consider the following letter to be a cautionary tale. Gregory Engel found himself taking life too seriously, so he sent the following letter to Tom and Ray Magliozzi, the hosts of Car Talk on America's national public radio, better known as Click and Clack, the Tappet Brothers. Both of them are graduates of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a school for serious thinkers. Gregory Engel writes, I've listened to your show for a while now. I must say I was a lot like you guys, carefree, blabbed a lot. This was before my life took a tragic turn, a turn which I sense both of you are on the verge of taking. There is no help for me, unfortunately, but perhaps my story will help prevent you from falling into the abyss that I have been thrown. It started out innocently enough. I began to think at parties now and then to loosen up. Inevitably, though, one thought led to another, and soon I was more than just a social thinker. I began to think alone, to relax, I told myself, but I knew it wasn't true. Thinking became more and more important to me, and finally I was thinking all the time. I began to think on the job. I knew that thinking and employment don't mix, but I couldn't stop myself. I began to avoid friends at lunchtime so I could go read Thoreau and Kafka. I would return to the coffee dizzied and confused, asking, what is it exactly we're doing here? Things weren't going so great at home either. One evening, I had turned off the TV and asked my wife about the meaning of life. She spent that night at her mother's. I soon had a reputation as a heavy thinker. One day the boss called me and he said, Greg, I like you, and it hurts me to say this, but your thinking has become a real problem. If you don't stop thinking on the job, you'll have to find another job. This gave me a lot to think about. I came home early after my conversation with the boss. Honey, I confessed, I've been thinking. I know you've been thinking, she said, and I want a divorce. But honey, surely it's not that serious. It is serious, she said, lower lip a quiver. You think as much as college professors, and college professors don't make any money. So if you keep on thinking, we won't have any money. That's a faulty syllogism, I said impatiently, and she began to cry. I'd had enough. I'm going to the library, I snarled as I stomped out the door. I headed for the library in the mood for some Nietzsche. I roared into the parking lot and ran up to the big glass doors, and they didn't open. The library was closed. To this day, I believe that a higher power was looking out for me that night. As I sank to the ground, clawing at the unfeeling glass, whimpering for Zarathustra, a poster caught my eye. Friend, is heavy thinking ruining your life? You probably recognize that line. It comes from the Standard Thinkers Anonymous poster, which is why I am today a recovering thinker. I never miss a TA meeting. At each meeting, we watch a non-educational video. Last week, it was Animal House. Then we share experiences about how we avoid thinking since the last meeting. I still have my job, and things are a lot better at home. Life just seemed easier somehow as soon as I stopped thinking. An integral part of my recovery has been your show. I regret, however, that your show has occasionally caused me to have a thought. Sometimes even two. I have found myself wanting to ask my car mechanic to ask him questions. Yes, questions. A sure sign of the presence of thinking. But I have work to do. I regret that unless you stop answering callers' questions in meaningful ways, I will be forced to discontinue my participation in your, until recently, completely mediocre show. I'd be glad to take you to a TA meeting when you're ready. Good luck. Gregory Engel, Englewood, Colorado. As frozen earth holds the determined seed, this sacred space holds our weariness, our worry, our laughter, and our celebration. Let us bring seed and soul into the light of thought, the warmth of community, and the hope of love. Let us see together, hear together, love together, laugh together. Let us worship. My flippant title that life is too valuable to be taken so seriously was a jab at myself. When I decided on it, I was aware that life had become a little too serious for me. I needed to hear a sermon that told me to lighten up a little. Let me share a secret about my sermons. I am almost always preaching to myself, inviting you to listen in if you're interested. In other words, I rarely practice what I preach, but I'm trying to do better. The title is flippant because, of course, life is serious business. But from some opinion pieces in the Herald, social media, and talk radio, there are a few folk that need to listen to this sermon with me. They have gone to great lengths to be wet blankets regarding our Prime Minister's giving birth, instead of taking a moment to celebrate new life. Yes, the coverage is a little excessive, but it is fodder for a few laughs, not disdain. Besides, it is only the second time in history that it has happened that the leader of a country has given birth while in office, as opposed to in the office, as the Daily Mail reported tongue-in-cheek. Just to understand how serious life is, consider what lies ahead for Jacinda and Clark's little girl, and the 24 others born that day in Auckland Hospital. Consider the matter of just being born. It isn't easy for any of the principal characters in the drama. Mom and Dad can give up any idea of sleeping in for the foreseeable future, as if being Prime Minister wasn't hard enough. There must be times she feels like she's trying to manage a birthday party for 6-year-olds. Then there's the ongoing struggle to grow up, learning to walk and falling down again and again without throwing in the proverbial towel and crawling through life. To say nothing of spelling and learning when to say I instead of me, as in, this sermon is meant for you and I, which is an overcorrection, since the object following the preposition for requires the sentence to say, this sermon is meant for you and me. See what I mean? In his book, The Social Animal, David Brooks quotes the linguist Jeffrey Miller, who says that most adults have a vocabulary of about 60,000 words. To build that vocabulary, children must learn 10 to 20 words a day between the ages of 18 months and 18 years. Wow. That, in spite of the fact that we apparently use only 100 of them frequently in 60% of our conversations. As soon as you stand on your own 2 feet and walk without falling and talk without making too many grammatical errors, you have to shake off your childish narcissism and consider the struggles that all the other people are carrying. And you have to have compassion for everyone you meet. Growing up is serious business. Then there are all the other chapters, figuring out how this love thing works and how it works for you, to say nothing of making friends in preschool and later passing your NCEA exams or deciding how to make a living. Then there's marriage and sometimes divorce, and the religious thing about God and death and taxes and death. Woody Allen said, I'm still obsessed by thoughts of death. I brood constantly. I keep wondering if there's an afterlife, and if there is, will they be able to break a 20? It's all very serious business, this business of living a life, to say nothing of trying to live a meaningful life. And being in the spotlight like Jacinda and Clark's wee one, it will be all the more challenging. That is a family that's going to need a sense of humor. Hope they get to listen to this sermon on YouTube in between changing nappies and breastfeeding before entering Parliament for question time, which fortunately is always good for a laugh. Having done most of the growing up thing at my age, what is dragging me down now is watching what is happening in the country of my birth, thanks to the present administration. It was bad enough when I advertised the topic for this week, but since then, the treatment of asylum seekers and their children has broken my heart. I give thanks to the God I don't believe in for Stephen Colbert, Trevor Noah, Samantha Bee, Seth Meyers, Alex Baldwin, and their writers who can find humor in the situation, no matter how black it might be. It is better than none at all. I would find it difficult to go on without them. And of course, Trump has lots of company. There's no lack of sociopathic, authoritarian narcissists, greedy international corporations, warlords, misogynists, racists, homophobes, and terrorists to make the world we live in serious business for those who are vulnerable and those of us who care about them. Those late-night comedians remind us how important it is to still find the joke if we are to survive. Last week, Rachel of the clan Macintosh told me that the Irish gave the Scots the bagpipes, and the Scots still haven't gotten the joke. Sometimes the joke is so obvious we're like the Scots. Ministers can be very susceptible to such blindness. since church is supposed to be serious business. We are often too much like Sherlock Holmes' faithful colleague, Dr. Watson. Apparently, the two went camping in the forest. After a good dinner and a bottle of wine, they went to sleep in the tent. Several hours later, Holmes awoke and nudged his faithful friend Watson. "Look at the sky and tell me what you see." Watson answered, "I see millions and millions of stars." "And what does that tell you?" Watson thought a minute and answered, "Astronomically, that tells me that there are potentially billions of planets. Astrologically, I see that Saturn is in Leo. Chronologically, I deduce that it is approximately 3:10 a.m. Theologically, I see that God is all-powerful and that we are all small and insignificant. Meteorologically, I suspect that we shall have a beautiful day tomorrow." Holmes was quiet for a minute and then said, "Watson, you idiot, it means someone stole our tent." The Herald reported this week that only 9% of Kiwis go regularly to church. I think a possible answer is that we either don't laugh enough in church or the unchurched don't think we do. Both could be right. But my experience tells me that you don't survive this long in the ministry without a sense of humor. Pointing out the human condition and helping us to laugh at ourselves is the job of comedians. I look around and see that I am surrounded by the human condition. There has to be a joke in here somewhere. The reason it might be hard to find is that laughter has not always been considered a good thing. Plato saw it as a moral vice. He held the perspective that laughter arises from our desire to feel superior over other people. He warned that laughter could lead to an undermining of authority and ultimately to the overthrow of the state. Jewish thought has always held a valued place for joy. Yes, there are lines in Hebrew scriptures such as Ecclesiastes 7:3, sorrow is better than laughter. But there are also a fair number of stories and verses about dancing and joy and celebration. The early church was a fair mix of both Jewish thought and Greek thought. Clearly, the Greek thought won out on the question of humor in Christianity for a long time. The early Christian church denounced laughter on the grounds that Jesus is reported to have wept, but never to have laughed. So weeping alone led to unity with God. This is reminiscent of the supposed Presbyterian ban on having sex standing up. It might lead to dancing. Elizabethan England had some staunch defenders of seriousness. Laughter was considered a form of losing control of oneself. It was seen as uncouth, even dangerous. One critic, George Catlin, warned that regular laughter irreparably damages your teeth. In the 1970s, attitudes about laughter began to change, in part thanks to Norman Cousins. You probably don't know about him, but he was the editor-in-chief of the Saturday Review for 30 years. He authored books and essays about politics, history, and literature. He was an unofficial ambassador between Kennedy, Khrushchev, and Pope John. And during his lifetime, he was awarded the Albert Schweitzer Prize for Humanitarianism, the Eleanor Roosevelt Peace Award, and the United Nations Peace Medal. He was a very serious man. He was not a Unitarian, but when he went to church, it was to a Unitarian one, where he donated the pulpit in memory of his friend Albert Schweitzer. He did not expect jokes to be told from it. But later in life, he had an epiphany. He had an experience of illness that led him to develop what he called the laugh cure. He was diagnosed with a form of debilitating arthritis. He was told by the doctors he had little chance of surviving. So he went about developing his own recovery program involving mega doses of vitamin C, along with a positive attitude, faith, hope, and laughter induced by Marx Brothers films. He found that a good belly laugh relieved him of pain for 2 hours at a time. He called laughter inner jogging. He lived another 10 years. Researchers didn't take him serious at first, but eventually there were studies that confirmed his findings. For example, research shows that laughter decreases the body's cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress-induced chemical related to heart disease and high blood pressure. Laughter also strengthens your immune system and increases the production of antibodies. Researchers state that a good laugh has many of the same benefits as a brisk walk. Laughter increases your air intake. Increasing your oxygen-rich air intake stimulates all your organs and relaxes your muscles. The Mayo Clinic advocates for laughter as a means to boost your immune system, soothe tension, relieve pain, play the piano, and improve your mood. Laughter is a vital part of life. Even great world religious literature advocates it. When God told Abraham and Sarah that they are going to have a child, they laughed as he was 100 and she 90. God had the last laugh. He told them to name him Isaac. I don't know if they got the joke. Isaac means laughter. Jesus told jokes as well, such as when he described selfishness as being as incapable of bringing happiness as a short man tried to pull at his head to increase his stature. Then there is the busybody with a huge log in his own eye, rushing about trying to locate the tiny splinters in other people's eyes. And there is the man who choked on a gnat but could swallow a camel. And the camel that could go through the eye of a needle more easily than a rich man could get into heaven. In Islam, the legendary master of laughter, Mullah Nasser ad-Din, tells this story. In the village plaza, under a blazing midday sun, the mullah, sweating and covered with dust, is on all fours looking for something in the sand. One of his neighbors sees him, approaches, and asks, "What have you lost?" "My key," answered the mullah, who continues to search while his neighbor kneels down to help him. After several minutes, sweating and panting, the latter asks, "Are you sure that this is where you lost it?" "Oh, no," replies the mullah. "I lost it at home." "But then why look for it here?" "Because here, my dear neighbor, there is more light." And then, of course, there are Unitarians. We love telling or hearing jokes about ourselves. On Prairie Home Companion, Garrison Keeler, who might be a closet Unitarian, loved to take the mickey out of us. He tells us that there are folks in Lake Wobegon who have a big satellite dish and get 500 channels on their TV, including the surgery channel, the fishing channel, and the Unitarian channel, which is what the fishing channel would be like if they didn't actually put the fish hooks and lines in the water, but just sat around and discussed whether or not there really are fish. Theologically, laughter is a sign of joy. Medically, it is seen as a means of stress relief. Psychologically, it is a means of mood enhancement. Philosophically, it may mean chaos or equality for humanity. Sociologically, it is a social phenomenon of group bonding, the establishment of group mores, and a means of conflict reduction. Although all that is true, laughter does not end the trouble and turmoil of life. Laughter does not stop depression or grief. Laughter is not an end to sadness and sorrow, only to seriousness. When we look for laughter in our lives, when we choose to meet the world with a giggle or a belly laugh, even in church, what withers away is not the pain or the grief. It is instead the gravity of it all that fades, the solemnity and seriousness that dwindles. Let us take all of life, the laughter and the pain, the joy and the sorrow. Life is too valuable to do otherwise. For our meditation, I'd like you to get comfortable and think about how enlightened you are. If you could live without caffeine, if you could be cheerful, ignoring aches and pains, if you could resist complaining, if you could understand when your loved ones are too busy to give you any time, if you could take criticism and blame without resentment, if you could ignore a friend's limited education and never correct him or her, if you could resist treating a rich friend better than a poor friend, if you could face the world without lies and deceit, if you can conquer tension without medical help, if you could relax without liquor, if you could sleep without the aid of drugs, if you can honestly say that deep in your heart you have no prejudice against creed, color, religion, gender preference, or politics, then you have almost reached the same level of spiritual development as your dog. Think about that. My closing words are by Philip Appleton. O karma, dharma, pudding, and pie, give me a break before I die. Grant me wisdom, will, and wit, purity, probity, pluck, and grit. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, kind, give me great abs and a steel-trap mind. And forgive, ye gods, some humble advice. These little blessings would suffice to begin an earthly paradise. Make the bad people good, and the good people nice. And before our world goes over the brink, teach the believers how to think.